Live, yep.
Friends, how do you make God laugh? Chassidus, the way it's taught to us by the Rebbe in this beautiful discourse on Chanukha, opens our eyes to understand our troubles, to understand our challenges, because what we're trying to do, what God is trying to do, is to make us allow Him to laugh. In other words, you got to develop a sense of humor. Instead of looking at life in a binary perception, where things are either good or bad, they're either up or down, I'm either happy or sad. What we're about to learn today in Chassidus is that is laughter, and we've discussed this in a previous session, I think last week, but we're going to do it in the text today. We're going to learn that laughter is the result of a punchline. What is a punchline? A punchline is an unexpected result. When you're expecting A and you get B, right? That's what a punchline is. A punchline is that you get the unexpected and you just burst out laughing. When God gives us lemons and we turn it into lemonade, that's a punchline. When we turn a negative into a positive, that's a punchline. And instead of complaining, Chassidus opens our eyes to say, you know what? Maybe it's time for us to develop a sense of humor and to see the broader picture and realize that we've been placed in this world as a test to challenge us in a profound game of hide and seek, where God is hiding, and we're supposed to seek Him. Now, the natural response to someone when God is hiding, I mean, imagine you got a game of hide and seek, and you didn't get the memo that it's a game of hide and seek. What would happen? You just go on your merry old business, right? But imagine if somewhere along the way you figure out that I'm actually in an epic, cosmic game of hide and seek. And you're like, well, what are we looking for? And that becomes an interesting conversation. And then you discover that you're in the game. And then you discover that you're actually looking for some entity which is invisible. One second, I'm playing hide and seek with an invisible entity? How exactly am I supposed to find? How am I supposed to find God if God is unseeable? How am I supposed to find God if God is untouchable, if God is ungraspable? I mean, God is infinite and I'm finite and I'm looking for Him. How will I ever know that I found Him? And now imagine if we figure this out somehow. We work out the rules of the game and then we say, aha, I gotcha. Then God chuckles. He enjoys that. Let's take a look at this beautiful idea in the text because it really is transformational. It's really a transformational idea in our lives. And remember, this is why we light the Chanukah lights in the darkness. This is in the flow of the discourse, which we're learning in the Mitzvasa, Mishetishka, Hachama. And I want to encourage you that this discourse is actually being taught on YouTube in a playlist. If you go to my YouTube, to youtube.com/Jewish Gardens, and you click on the top of the page where it says playlist, you'll see there's different playlists, and they're actually in order. Yeah. You can learn Tanya with me. You can learn this discourse on Chanukah. There's other discourses that you can learn together with me, and you can just do them in order. So even though we do them every couple of days, but on YouTube they're sequenced in order, so you can actually discuss them with me together. It was actually very nice. Yesterday I got a call from someone in Commerce, Michigan. You know what that is? I never heard of Commerce, Michigan. And he told me he studies Tanya with me. And we connected on a beautiful, deep spiritual level for a few minutes. It was a very, very beautiful conversation. And it's great. You know, we're able to connect in terms of taking advantage of the tools that are before us. Instead of, you know, this is not your grandfather or grandmother's shul. You know, we're a global conversation. And we're able to take advantage of the resources and tools out there. Remember what it says in the very end of the Ethics of the Fathers in the Mishnah. It says, every single thing that God created in this world was created for His service, for His honor. Every single thing in this world. You need to figure out, crack the code. How is it that I can use this in the service of God? So for us to take a computer, for us to take a social media platform, for us to take a camera and whatever, and an internet connection, to be able to turn that into a global conversation of Torah is, I believe, the purpose, the mission statement of Chabad, what the Mashiach told the Baal Shem Tov that year, I think it was in 1737 1737, I think it was, Rosh Hashanah of the year 1737, when the Baal Shem Tov had the elevation of his soul, and he reached into the chamber of Mashiach, and he asked the Mashiach, when are you coming already? And he said, when your well springs will disseminate outwards. What is outwards? Knock yourself out. When your well springs will disseminate outwards, when you go way out, when the world will be filled with the knowledge of God, like the ocean waters cover the seabed, that's when you'll know that it's time for Mashiach to come. Yes, Mark, you have a question?
Yes. How do we make God laugh when he's almighty and all-knowing? Nothing anyone does ever surprises God.
Because he would know, because he's past, present, and future. So he would know.
So if God is all-knowing, how can you surprise God? It's a tough one. It's a good question.
I don't think he can.
It's a good question. So I think that your question indicates a keen understanding, not profound, a keen understanding of the subject matter. And I commend you for that. Because I think a lot of people might struggle to even get to that question. They'd be like, okay, we're going to make God laugh. Haha, let's go for it. But you're really understanding the context of what we're talking about. Because you're saying, it's kind of like, in the Ten Commandments, Moses is up on the mountain. And God asks them, do the Jews want the Torah? He says, I don't know. Let me ask them. So he goes down and he asks them, do you want the Torah? And they say, yeah, sure. We don't care what it says. We'll just take it. Hang on, let me finish the point. We'll finish what it says. We'll do it. We'll commit, and then we'll read what it says. And then what does Moses do? He climbs back up the mountain. He's the guy's 80 years old. He's climbing. I think he's 81 by now. He's climbing up the mountain. He says, they said yes. Why did he need to say? Do you think God doesn't know that they said yes? Like what? If God doesn't know that they said yes, maybe we shouldn't be pledging allegiance to this God, right? If his Wi-Fi doesn't reach down the bottom of the mountain, then maybe we shouldn't be accepting his Torah, right? It's a good question, right? Same thing, God tells Moses to count the Levites. It's in the portion of, I think it's in Pinchas. Yeah, I think it's in Pinchas. Tells him to count the Levites. Okay, so how do you count the Levites? The regular Jews are counted from the age of 20 years old to 60, but the Levites are counted from 30 days old. Now, how are you going to count the 30-day-old babies? You got to go to the mother's tent. They're nursing mothers. Now, it's not modest for Moses to climb into a tent, into a nursery where mother's nursing a child, right? And to start counting how many infants, how many Levites in this house, how many Levites. What did Moses do? He walked to the entrance of each tent. And as he walked to the entrance of each tent, a heavenly voice said, X amount of Levites in this tent. Okay, good. He went to the next tent. Heavenly voice, X amount of Levites in this tent. And he went from tent to tent to tent to tent. And a heavenly voice came out and declared how many X amount of Levites are in the tent. And then he did the math. He put it on a little parchment, whatever, a tablet, maybe an iPad or something. And he calculated together. He comes back to God and he says, this is how many Levites there are. And you're like, one second. If God knows how many Levites, then what? What's he doing of it?
So we're saying, and I read elsewhere, that we're constantly being tested, and if we meet the challenge of our test, isn't that to give God pleasure rather than give God humor?
Okay, let me just finish this answer. I'm going to get that in a second. Hold on. I'm just going to put that question on hold a second. I'm just finish answering him. So why does God need us to go count? God knows how many Levites there are, and guess what? God knows how many what we said about the Torah. He knows it before we even said it. Okay. The question is if we know. That's the question. If we know how many Levites there are, and if we know what our response is to the Torah, and the question is, if we know how to deal with challenge, if we know how to deal with struggle, God knows how to deal with struggle. The question is, if we're in on the joke, if we've risen to that higher consciousness where we can say, I've got a problem. Terrific. This is an opportunity for me to effect a transformation and thus to appeal to God's sense of humor. You understand? So as opposed to coming and saying, got a problem. I'm depressed. I'm not getting out of bed today. I'm so sad, miserable. I'm going to be mean to my wife today. I'm going to be non-present for my children today. No, that's not the right approach. You understand what I'm saying? He comes in and he says, you know what? I got a challenge. Awesome. This is fantastic. And I'm going to turn this into an opportunity. You know what's interesting, Mark? You really set me off here. I'm sorry with your question. I'm going to get you a second. It says that, this comes from Tanya, chapter 27, that it says that Jacob, Isaac, I'm sorry. Isaac. Remember when Isaac wanted to bless his son? He wanted to bless Esau. Remember that story? And Jacob hears about it through the mother, through Rivka, right? So what happens? Rivka tells Jacob that dad asked Esau to go make him food so that he can bless them, but I want you to get the blessing, so I'm going to make the food and you'll preempt your brother. The whole story, right? What exactly did Isaac ask for? He says, "Vaseli matamim kasher ahavti." Make me delicacies as I like them, as I love them. And the Rashi explains he wanted savory and sweet. He wanted delicacies, savory and sweet. Like he wanted the garlic goat thing, and he wanted the sweet goat. Yeah, like the sweet. Yeah, the sweet and sour is the same dish, though. I can never tell if it's sweet or sour. I think it's more sweet than sour, but whatever. He wanted two. He wanted the savory and he wanted the sweet. And Chassidus Tanya explains what's up with Isaac's menu choices. Like, why do we need to know what Isaac's menu preferences were for his entree? We don't know what his appetizer was. We don't know what wine he was drinking. So why do we need to know what Isaac's palate preferred? Are we copying the recipe? Are we doing this Shabbos Kiddush like Isaac, the Isaac Kiddush? Like, what's going on over here? So the Alter Rebbe explains that there's two kinds of pleasures. There's a pleasure which is straightforward, like sweet. You don't need to develop a taste for sweetness. You don't need to go to a 5-year-old and convince them to want to eat a candy because it just comes naturally. But if you're going to offer some aged wine to a 5-year-old, he's going to spit it all out and say, what is this? You need to be mature to appreciate a Chardonnay, right? Or a Pinot Grigio, which I still am struggling to appreciate. Keith, you gotta mature me a little bit more to reach your state of maturity. Your Pinot Grigio, I still don't understand how it tastes good, but okay. So where am I going with this? Is that there's a taste which comes naturally, and then there's a taste that basically it's got a kick, because the initial reaction is not to like it. It tastes like garlic. I mean, you have it like it tastes like spicy, and then you learn to appreciate it later. And sophistication, and that. The reason why the Torah is telling us about this is because, like Isaac's palate, so too God also has two kinds of modalities. He has a straightforward pleasure from us, which is when we do the right thing. And then he has a savory pleasure from us, which is when we're faced with a great challenge. You begin life with a disadvantage. You were never sent to Hebrew school. I was speaking to a person yesterday, a member of our show, was raised in a Christian school system. And for the early part of her life, she was like, denied the ability to express her Judaism. Until today, she lives with this inhibition, this spiritual inhibition. So that's not because God hates you, but because God wants from you, he wants savory. Understand? And I hope that answers your question. What was your question, Chuck?
Well, we're
Pleasure.
constantly being challenged.
Challenge, right?
And rising to the occasion and
Right.
meeting the challenge gives God pleasure.
Right.
I didn't read any place where you're just saying it, but up until now,
You've never heard
I've
of
never heard of it.
laughter.
Of doing that gives God humor.
So you've learned about pleasure, a student of Tanya. You've learned a lot about pleasure for God, but you're not so familiar with the term of laughter for God, right? Is that it? Humor.
Correct. Meeting the purpose.
It's a little weird, right? To say like we're going to humor God. I mean, that was your question mark. Like how am I humoring God, right? Well, I want to open your eyes and introduce you to this concept, which is why I want to do it black and white today. I want to do it in the text. So you'll notice that we're going to be mentioning both terms, pleasure and humor together. You ready? Watch it. And that's why it's important, folks. It's very important to learn Torah from the text itself. It's one thing when you hear it in a sermon, you learn it, as a receiver, like a spectator, fine. But when you are able to take your study to the actual text, now you're no longer merely being a receiver. You're not like a second stage receiver. You're actually coming straight from the source, right? There's an interesting law in Shabbos. You're not allowed to cook on Shabbos. You're not allowed to cook. So how to make a coffee on Shabbos? How can you make coffee on Shabbos? If you take coffee beans or ground coffee, and you put it into boiling water, you know what happens? You're cooking the coffee. That's what you're doing. You're cooking the coffee on Shabbos, and you're not allowed to do that on Shabbos.
But you can't make an urn the night before and access the coffee.
Oh, so first of all, first question is if you opening, your Instahot. If you turn on a kettle or you turn on your instant, what you're doing is that you're taking cold water that's somewhere in the pipes and you cook in the water. The water's being cooked. That's right there is already a breaking of Shabbos. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have an urn before Shabbos, and the urn is keeping the water hot the whole Shabbos. Fantastic. But now you're taking the water, you put the coffee in the bottom of the cup, and you put the cup underneath the urn, and the water comes out of the urn. What happens? You're cooking the coffee. Because the water is coming from the first source of heat, from the direct source of heat that's inside of. There's an element in there in the urn, and it's boiling water, and the boiling water is going onto the cup, onto the coffee, so it's cooking it. What do you have to do? You have to take. What you have to do is you have to do a second cup. You take an empty cup, a mug. You put the mug under the urn, and you fill up a cup of hot water, and then from this cup, you now take this cup and you pour it into the cup, a second cup, and then you put the coffee inside. Why? What? I'm glad you find that funny. Why is that funny? This guy, I'm glad I made you laugh.
Right, exactly.
You see, you're on topic. But why is that making you laugh?
Why? Because it's the same, like, you can't charge interest to a Jew. But you know what? Now we're going to I prepare a document that makes me your partner in the business. And I can't do this. I can't do roundabout. Yeah, right, exactly. I can't.
He's not happy.
But so what I'll do is I'll sell it to somebody else. You know what? I mean, the Jews.
Are you not a lawyer? I'm just trying to understand. Rob, are you not a lawyer? Don't lawyers do this all day, every day?
Exactly. I don't want God.
Am I right? I mean, I'm not in your field, but
no offense. I don't want God to be a lawyer.
Who do you think invented the profession? You think you invented the profession? Your people?
Then it should be nice to be professional courtesy.
Yeah, you should have professional courtesy. I think you will have professional courtesy, by the way. But I just want to point out to you. Look, bear with me a moment before you backhandedly dismiss my whole construct here. Okay, let me just finish what I'm trying to say. So what happens is when you take the water, you'd have to agree with me that when the water is coming straight from the urn onto the coffee, it's at a higher temperature than if it goes into a cup, into a mug, and then it goes into.
But it went into the mug from the heater, which was
right. So it went from the heater, from the urn, into the mug, and from the mug, it went into a second mug. Would you agree that there's a mitigation of heat, of temperature?
Well, minimal.
Of course there is.
Depends how quickly you can pour it.
No, it makes no difference.
The walls of the mug are not hot. They're gonna cool it down. So what happens when you have surface area exposure? What's the point? What you're doing is that by passing it over to a second cup before the coffee goes in, you've cooled the temperature.
Still sounds like.
Hang on, let me finish my point. So let me finish. So what's the difference? So now you can easily look at this law of Shabbos and say, like, whatever, it's so technical. Okay, fine, this is hardly spiritual. Or you can say like this. You can temperature drops 10 degrees per hour. T signs according to Almighty Om. He says 10 degrees per hour. Per pour, sorry. 10 degrees per pour. Every pour, wow, I never realized it's 10 degrees. Oh my God, that's a lot. That's a lot. Okay, now we're going to test it. Fine, very good. Thank you, Almighty. Om. Per pour, yeah. But I think God is with us. Okay, hold on. So why am I telling you the story? Why am I throwing in Shabbos? Rob, where does Shabbos come in here? Because when you're studying Torah directly from the source, from the urn, it's different to when you're studying Torah from me, when I am just the mug that's taken from the urn. So here I am, I'm studying with a book. This is the Torah, right? And I'm reading the book, and then I'm teaching it to you in a sermon. You're hearing it from where? Where are you hearing it from? You're hearing it from the mug, from the receptacle. This is Chassidus, pure Chassidus. This is the hidden Torah. This is it. This is it. Hang on. But if you have the courage to take what I'm saying, and then you go back and you say, I want to see this for myself. Now you're taking the mug that's made your coffee and I'm going into the urn. Now your connection is a totally different connection. And that's what I want to encourage you guys to do. We've been learning Torah, some of us, for several years. And I think it's important for us to raise the bar of our Torah study. Like your question, Chuck, is very insightful. Exactly. Raise the temperature. Exactly. Because the question is, are you satisfied with a lukewarm spirituality? Or are you ready to have hot soup?
So what if
boiling soup?
What if you had the cup sitting on a warming plate, which you keep on in Shabbos, a warming plate?
Yeah.
So the cup is no longer.
If the cup is sitting on a warming plate,
I have a bigger question.
Wait,
Yeah.
Just a minute. Mister, just a minute.
Wait a minute. How can you do
You didn't
it
answer
with
his
coffee
question
beans?
first.
Don't you need something like the powdered stuff that's already been cooked and
Instant,
dried?
instant.
Instant
And then you
coffee.
just-
So that's what he
Yeah.
needs.
that's what we're talking about. I'm talking about that.
No, you said beans.
I'm talking about the ground beans. I'm not a coffee expert. Forgive me. But yeah, I mean, even if you did that, by the way, it's still not. The mug is not going to be the heat of the element. Okay, it's still not going to be the heat of the element. Yes.
When you said the actual text is better than the processing the information, so when you're doing your sermons, do you try to incorporate the actual text on some of the?
Yes, of course. You'll notice in my sermons, I don't quote. You'll notice in my sermons, I will often quote a page from Talmud. Now, why am I doing that? I'm not doing that because I'm trying to show off that I'm telling you that I happen to know an extra page of Talmud. The reason is because there are people in the audience that are actually going to go home. They own a Talmud at home, or they're going to go to this Talmud right here behind me, and they're going to open up the page of the Talmud that I referenced, and they're going to look it up. And what's going to happen is I'm giving them a tool as to how they can, they can raise the temperature on this particular message for themselves. That's what I'm doing, and that's the purpose of quoting a source, right? As opposed to you having faith in me that this is the explanation and that's it, right? Okay, let's go back to the text. I want to do a little bit of text over here. Okay, we're on page 224 in this book. We're in the Sefer Maamarim. I don't know what this book actually has a name. It's called simply Chassidus. You can get it on the Kahot website, kahotonline.com. Every pour into a new vessel drops the temperature roughly 8 to 10 degrees Celsius, 15 to 18 degrees Fahrenheit due to heat transfer, folks, from Almighty. There it is. You see? Now, I want to make sure that you don't drop your temperature. And what happens when you get it from me versus when you get it straight from the source? I think it's going to be more than 18 degrees Fahrenheit
No, but there's also a danger.
difference. What's the danger?
The danger is, it's like when you put a frog in a pot of water and
Yeah.
you start to raise the temperature. By the time he realizes he's being boiled, it's too
too
late.
late.
Right.
So for us,
You don't want to go straight to the source. You might run
we
away.
can go straight to
Very
the
good.
source.
That's why you need a rabbi. Rob, that's why you need a rabbi. Rob, you'll notice. Yeah, when you read it yourself, it's too hot for you. If you read the straight from the text, I want to give you an example. It's like the way I'm teaching the Tanya. It's the way I'm teaching the Tanya, the personal Tanya. You'll notice on my Tanya playlist on YouTube, on the personal Tanya, what I'm doing is I do 5-minute synopsis of the Tanya, but I'll always post the link to that day's text.
Right.
Why? Because if you're going to read that text yourself, chances are 96% chance you're not going to understand what's flying. Or maybe you'll understand a small amount of what's flying. What I'm doing is I'm giving you an orientation in that daily Tanya in 5 minutes so that you can then go into the text and say, now I get what it's talking about. That's the goal. Let's go into the text, folks. Page 224. So now we're trying to understand. We're going to explain that pleasure is unexpected. It's a surprise. It's the punchline. And when we transform evil into good, challenges into achievements, that is pleasure for God. And that is something that happens only in this world. That's what we're going to explain. That is something that happens only in this world. Why does it happen only in this world? Because this is a world of spiritual darkness. This is the lowest world. Remember that, right? This is the lowest spiritual world. Higher worlds, what does it mean they're higher? It doesn't mean that they're higher in the atmosphere. It means that they're more aware and more conscious of God. So it's only in this world where it's spiritually dense. In fact, it's a total blackout of spirituality. Only in this world here do we have the ability to experience a total blackout to godly revelation, and then to transform that into awareness. Let's go. This pleasure which God receives when the Jewish people fulfill his longing. As explained earlier, that results from the transformation of the darkness of the marketplace to the public domain. What we explained before in the previous paragraph is that the word for pleasure for God, nishtokek, longing, the word for longing for God in Hebrew, and the word for marketplace is the same word. Shuk in Hebrew is marketplace, and nishtokek means desired. It sounds like God desired the marketplace. Right? Now, the marketplace, we explained earlier in this discourse, is a place of plurality. It's a place of chaos. It's the opposite of uniformity. It's the opposite of monotheism. Right? The marketplace is effectively the place of polytheism, where there's all sorts of powers at play. Right? So how could that be the place of God's pleasure? So what we explained in the previous paragraph in this discourse is that God's pleasure is specifically in the most dysfunctional place. Why? Because when we, the Jews, transform the dysfunction into function, the chaos into order, the spiritual blackout into spiritual awareness, we are now experiencing or giving God pleasure. And we're going to explain that why. So this pleasure which God receives when the Jewish people fulfill his longing, his desire, as explained above, that results in the transformation of the darkness of the marketplace to public domain, and the mountains of separation, or referring to the klipos, into light. Revealed godliness is the greatest level of pleasure. This is God's greatest level of pleasure. Why? This is related to the concept of laughter, which, here you go, Chuck, laughter. You see, it says laughter.
I see it.
Which, as explained elsewhere in Chassidus, is the greatest pleasure in the world. Laughter is the greatest pleasure in the world.
Well, they say here that laughter is a form of pleasure.
Hang on, yeah, right. Exactly.
They're not separate there.
Exactly. I told you, it's a similar concept. Laughter is a type of pleasure that results from experiencing something new and unexpected. When the Jewish people transform the darkness into light, it is similar to the creation of something new in this world. This gives God, so to speak, and again, it's so to speak because God is anthropomorphic. To your question, Mark, this gives God this tremendous pleasure, which is similar to the concept of laughter. So, folks, you know what this means? It means that when you have an anti-Semite rise up and say that it's perfectly okay for Hamas to have justified resistance on October 7th, right? Some anti-Semite in American leadership, right? So the Jewish people can easily react with fear. America, this is our safe haven. This is our sanctuary. How could they possibly condone such evil? But if instead the Jew reacts not with fear, but with faith, not with chaos, but with purpose, not with confusion, but with clarity, where he says, I understand why God is giving me this problem, because it's a test. He's testing me. He wants to see if I can react with positivity. He wants to see if I can say, L'chaim, God Almighty, I'm not afraid of this shmendrik, because I know that the only power is you. Then what we're doing is that we're giving God laughter, right? We're taking the dysfunction and turning it into function. This concept, folks, I want you to meditate on this idea. This is life-changing. Warren, you understand what this means? It's life-changing, this concept. It's absolutely life-changing.
I think that's one of the brilliant things about Chassidus. Because if you go to a conservative show, and I've been going to conservative show my whole life, no one's really laughing. Rabbi's not cracking jokes for the most part.
What's the matter with that?
No, it's serious. And in Orthodox, regular Orthodox, everything's very serious. And here you come, and the rabbi starts off with a joke.
It's a party.
Which I love. And it's joyous, because they preach and joy as a result of all.
Right, that's a beautiful idea.
It's so different.
It's
just so different than anything I've ever seen.
Rabbi, I complained about back in the other place I stayed. Rabbi would start with a joke, and sometimes the joke is funny, depending on who's telling the joke. But I asked the question, why did the rabbi, and I don't know if I read it, they told me, when you start with a joke to a congregation or a group, it relaxes the mind.
Yes.
And you're enabled to consume more.
That comes from Tanya chapter 6. Tanya chapter 6 or 7.
You're welcome.
Yeah, beautiful. Let me just say this. A friend of yours, Warren, a friend of yours here, Larry from Richmond. When I met him first time, I said, Larry, do you know what Chabad is? He said to me, beautiful answer. This guy's a big businessman. He said, yeah, I know what Chabad is. I said, tell me. He said, Chabad is the happy Jews. The happy. I'm like, yes, that is so right. It is so beautiful. It is absolutely accurate. And I just want to conclude by saying that I was going to say something, folks. I'm sorry. Oh, true story. So this guy, Chabad on campus. It's not easy to run a Chabad on college campus. It's not exactly walk in the park, So he's trying to run a minyan. It's Yom Kippur. It's Kol Nidre. He's trying to get a minyan. He can't get a minyan. He's got, 8 students. He's got like 6 students, and his son is just out of our mitzvah, and the chef or something. He's doing the catering. He's got 9 men, and he's the pen, the Kol Nidre, right? So he sees this anti-Semitic Jewish professor down the hall. He's like, sir, could you please help us make a minyan? So the Jewish professor, who's like an atheist, agnostic, he says, really pro Hamas. So he says, I'm sorry, but I cannot do that on principle. I don't believe in organized religion. So the rabbi says, does this look like organized religion to you? It's Yom Kippur. We can't even pull a minyan. We're going to be more disorganized. We're trying to make it work. Anyway, so let's call it a day. You had a question you wanted to ask?
Didn't God want to show his hand in a sense where, he saved the President Trump's life and saying, okay, even if you like or dislike Trump, it doesn't matter. I'm in control. So, I mean, it wasn't that like a thing?